Hi there, everybody. Sorry about that. WATE 6 on your side producer Jeff McLean here with WATE 6 on your side legal analyst Greg Isaacs, and we're looking into a huge development in a case that we've been following for weeks now: the Knox County Schools mask mandate. If you haven't been following it, there's a big question going into the school year about whether there was going to be a mask mandate this year like last year. The school board said we will make a few changes, but we're not going to. Part of that reason is because the governor issued a executive order, number 84, saying that they could opt out, or parents could opt out, and if a local school board issued a mask mandate, they could opt out. Some parents here sued, and today a judge is essentially saying, yeah, you're going to have to mask up, and the governor can't let you opt out. Greg, let's talk about it. What's this ruling?
Well, Jeff, what a high-profile ruling by Judge Greers here in the Eastern District of Tennessee. The United States District Court has granted a preliminary injunction that has basically set aside the executive order of Governor Lee, which required a opt-out provision from any school district that had a mask mandate, and secondly, overturned the Knox County Board of Education ruling that they were not going to require masks. So really significant. And Jeff, you know when it takes place? Immediately. Now, here's what the court ruled. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the school districts have an affirmative duty to implement a reasonable accommodation. And the plaintiffs in this case were a number of special needs disabled students. And if you read that complaint, these children had significant needs. One, and their initials are used to protect the anonymity of the child, was born with one ventricle in their heart. It left them susceptible to immunodeficiency issues. Another had a significant genetic brain malformation. So these are significantly disabled children. And the plaintiffs allege that if their non-disabled peers do not wear a mask, there's a likelihood that they would contract COVID-19 or the variant, and that it limits and impedes their right to move around the school, to have the education that federal law requires. And so here's what Judge Greers, after considering the complaint, said. He found two things that are highly significant. One, there was a substantial likelihood that the plaintiffs would suffer serious bodily injury or even death, one of the elements for a preliminary injunction. Second, he signaled that there is a substantial likelihood that the plaintiffs would prevail on the merits of the lawsuit. So he made two really significant findings. One, that if their non-disabled peers were not wearing masks, that these children would be susceptible to injury or even death. And second, he signaled that this lawsuit most likely is going to end up with a ruling in favor of the plaintiffs.
All right, and while we're at that, Greg, let's talk about the ADA, because the ADA is kind of key here, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and also that Section 504 that you mentioned of the Rehabilitation Act. Now, one component there is reasonable accommodation. That's kind of the hook, is you have to follow these guidelines to make a reasonable accommodation for these folks. But in this case, it's not the disabled folks, or it's not like they're installing a wheelchair ramp. They're telling parents, send your kids to mask schools. You can't opt out except for some really specific medical conditions. How does that work?
How does that work? It's a very unique interpretation of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So instead of doing accommodation where you would have bathrooms equipped with handles or ramps that we see in schools because of the ADA, they're requiring students that are non-disabled to wear a mask to impede the transmission of COVID-19 and deal with the pandemic. But here's what's interesting, Jeff. I mean, you can have lunch with decision makers, your friends, your family, doctors, and everyone can debate very passionately and vehemently the science. Do masks work? Do they not work? Is it a causation? Governor Lee spearheaded, we have a basically COVID immunity act that makes it very difficult to sue someone for under the allegation they transmitted COVID requires an expert opinion. Now you fast forward to Judge Greer. It's going to be interesting when this case goes to trial on the merits. Now, again, this is only a preliminary injunction, but if you read it, it looks like it enjoined the governor, enjoined the school board. But how are you going to prove that wearing a mask is going to directly impact the health, welfare, and he used the words public safety of these disabled students?
Well, let's back up actually to kind of the second step in this case. The lawsuit was filed, and then almost immediately, the lawsuit originally asked for a temporary restraining order. And Judge Greer basically immediately said no. And that was because they asked for that mandate the day after. They asked for that mandate the day after the school board said no. Why did Judge say no then versus yes for now?
Well, facts are stubborn things, and to have a restraining order or a preliminary injunction, you have to meet the legal elements that are required, different elements for the preliminary injunction. So I think that answers your question. But if you're the lawyers, and we've heard from the Knox County Law Director's Office, or if you're a parent, you're saying, okay, here in the Eastern District, we have a mask mandate because there is a substantial risk or likelihood of serious injury or death to disabled students if their non-disabled peers don't wear masks. What about our neighbors in Blount County, Anderson County, Union County, Sevier County? Shelby County had a similar ruling from a federal district judge, but there are 90 other counties that are not required to have masks. So it's going to be interesting how this plays out.
Well, Greg, you spoke of the attorney there. We, 6 on Your Side reporter Blake Stevens talked to one of the attorneys representing some of the plaintiffs in this case a week and a half ago. Let's hear from what he had to say. And keep in mind, this is before a lot of the court paperwork came through and before today's ruling. Let's take a quick look at that.
Questions facing many Knox County parents.
Do I send my child to school to get the in-person education, but risk getting COVID, or do I keep the child home and risk not getting the education?
It's why attorney Justin Gilbert is asking a judge to require masks in Knox County schools. The lawsuit cites 3 Knox County students with rare health conditions. It claims without a mandate, those students are, quote, unable to safely attend school without increased risks of serious injury or even death, unlike their non-disabled peers. The CDC says there is limited evidence about which conditions might increase a child's risk for severe COVID illness, but, quote, current evidence suggests that children with medical complexity, with genetic, neurologic, metabolic conditions, or with congenital heart disease might be at increased risk for severe illness from COVID-19. Gilbert thinks masks could save lives.
There are many, many other children like them, obviously not disabilities this severe in many cases, but nonetheless, kids with heart conditions, lung conditions, all kinds of medical conditions that are increased or at increased risk due to COVID.
The suit also cites federal law that requires reasonable accommodations for students with disabilities.
And all of the evidence is showing us that with masking, that will reduce their risks and enable them to access the school building.
Okay, Greg, so we've heard there from the attorney, and the argument here, and this is something I think that the judge picked up on, is that there's a lot of what he saw as plenty of evidence to stop this. Let me play for you something from the other side. As soon as this came out, we saw State Representative Jason Zachary, 14th District, right here in Knox County. A conservative Republican. He is foursquare against these sort of mandates and so forth. He tweeted and then put out well, I'm sorry, he tweeted a video about it, and let's take a listen to what he had to say. Just one sec.
Appointed federal judge Ronnie Greer has issued an order that Knox County must issue a mask mandate without an opt-out. An appointed federal judge has come into our county in which our duly elected body has already made a ruling twice related to any kind of mask mandate that we're not doing it. We're giving parents the ability to be parents and make the best decision for their children. A federal judge has now come in functioning as a legislative body trying to implement a mask mandate in Knox County. This foolishness only stops when we make it stop. Government derives its power from the consent of the governed. Do you consent? That's the question. Do you consent, and will you continue to consent? This is a stand that has to be made, and this is where we make our stand. So what do? What's the next step? You send your child to school Monday without a mask. You don't put a mask on your child. If you choose to do so, that's your right as a parent to put that mask on your child. It is very, very clear from the data, children have little to fear when it comes to COVID. We have to make our stand, and this is where we make our stand. A federal judge cannot circumvent a legislative body, and we cannot allow this to continue. I encourage our school board, I encourage our superintendent Bob Thomas, stay the course. Stay the course on behalf of the parents. This is when we double down. I've already reached out to the governor, the speaker, and the lieutenant governor asking for a special session again. Bring us back in and let us take legislative action to deal with this legislatively. I'm with you. I'm for you. I got your back. If you need me, reach out to me. Thanks.
Okay, Greg, well, you just heard there from State Representative Jason Zachary essentially calling for a nullification. He wants people to disobey this order. What happens?
Interesting. You have somebody in the legislative branch of government on the state level talking about and complaining about separation of powers, etc. But Jason Zachary needs to go back to Government 101. These are federal statutes that Judge Greer has cited. You can't go down to Nashville and pass a law that would somehow limit the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504. A representative or a state body cannot eliminate federal laws designed to protect the handicapped. I mean, that's whatever. But you know, I would be very careful if I was Mr. Zachary when you encourage, or you know, if you're a parent, a student, and you willfully or a school board violates a federal judge's order, the consequences can be severe and they will be swift. So, you know, and the other thing that's kind of troublesome, you know, if you read the complaint and you read Judge Greer's complaint, these are children that are severely disabled, regardless of the science of mask, not whatever. But you didn't hear anything about the children. You didn't hear anything about let's debate the science. So, you know, I would encourage everyone to take a deep breath, and he said this is political, not a scintilla of politics in the opinion. It's
well, now that's true, but the law director's office, that was like their first underlined argument in their argument was this is political, that masks are political. We elected leaders both on the state, the local, and the state and local level who enable policies, but that's it. And how do you override it? Is this literally just a federal versus, you know, the federal court, the highest court in the land? Is that how this ends?
Well, again, I encourage Jason Zachary to go back and read Civics 101. It's like saying the United States Supreme Court cannot overrule our Tennessee Supreme Court. These are federal statutes designed to protect the disabled. Just because you don't like the fact there's handicapped parking spaces, you can't promulgate a law to eliminate them. These are well thought out statutes designed to protect. So, you know, what we all need to do, I would encourage them, is to work together to come up with a solution. But regardless what you feel or how you feel or whatever, there is a federal order mandating that Knox County Schools, 60,000 students, the administrators, do not follow Governor Lee's executive order. They do not follow the vote of the Knox County Board of Education, and it is to be implemented immediately.
Well, let me talk about the immediately part there. This, assuming this does go into effect, and the opponents.
Well, it is in effect.
Okay, it goes into effect
So
on
let's
Monday.
assume, all right.
It goes into effect today, I guess, actually.
Yes.
But come Monday, Jimmy Buffett aside, what happens? Somebody's, Jason Zachary's out there saying, let's fight back, let's stop. I'm sure a lot of politicians are going to be doing that. Is there a legal recourse? Is there a pathway of appeals going forward?
There's always a pathway to appeal, but let's let the lawyers and the judges, if I was Jason Zachary, I'd pick up the phone and call my lawyer in Nashville. That's the proper way to fight this. But, again, if you willfully violate the federal court's order, you can be held in contempt and the remedies can be whatever. It reminds me kind of in an odd way the lawyers that encouraged everyone to disavow some of the election issues. And I don't care what side you're on, but federal judges come down swift and they come down hard. So, let's let the legal system work its course regardless of what side you're on. But here's what concerns me, Jeff, is I hope Monday morning you're not going to see protest. You're not going to hear loud, angry voices. We're not going to see Tennessee on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC and these children petrified to get off a bus or afraid to walk in the courthouse. Read the order. Let's address it. If you're against it, vehemently fight it, appeal it, and exhaust all your legal remedies. But let's not put these children in the middle of politics, separation of powers, etc. But it is going to be interesting because this mask mandate that has created passion throughout the country, and people argue it on both sides very passionately, but this is a question of science and the law, and do we know to 100% certainty what the right answer is? No. But do we know to 100% certainty what a federal judge ruled here in the Eastern District of Tennessee? Yes. And I encourage Representative Zachary and others to read the opinion, and if you disagree, exhaust your legal remedies.
Okay, well, folks, we're still digging into this. We've got reporters out talking to folks. We're getting responses from a lot of lawmakers. We'll have more of that starting at 4. Greg, thanks so much for being here. And we have Greg on every Wednesday. We do a live stream. We also have him on our show at 5:30 for Ask Isaacs. We'll have more on this coming up today, starting at 4. Hope you'll join us then and on WATE.com.